My first job was at McDonald's. When it comes to like, if you're actually at a cross point in your life of like, you're thinking like, should I go work at a big tech company? Should I go work at a startup, or should I join the military? Like, that decision is going to be driven a lot by like your age and where you're at in your life. Right?
I wrote these questions last night trying to make sure that I was trying to put this together right.
I think people think too much about the brands and the company that they're going to work for. What is something that I would enjoy doing for 8 hours a day? That is the question.
But the true humble beginnings for everyone else is you working at Taco Bell. Like, that's super humble beginnings right there.
Fun fact, Ben Franklin is like my 8th great uncle, and I read his biography as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Tony, this is a systemic problem, actually. Pre-sales is like, whoever's listening to this, it's whatever your favorite food is. Pre-sales is like ice cream or like a juicy steak. Post-sales is like broccoli, you know? It's like steamed broccoli without any salt. You need to eat it. It is for your own good. You don't love to eat it.
The Tony Moze Podcast.
Hello, everybody. You have reached the Tony Moze Podcast, where in this segment, I interview tech professionals of all levels in marketing, sales, pre- and post-sales on their journeys, hoping to inspire you, yes, you, to make the transition from your previous career and into the tech world. This is an audio episode with many video sequences to come. And if you are interested in other aspects, you can also follow me on other outlets, including LinkedIn at Anthony Palmozzi, Twitter at Tony_Moze, and YouTube at Tony Moze, where I provide you with a different angle from my experiences as a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional. Today's guest is Trevor Spires. He was an IT guy in the Airforce, to doing customer success in the civilian world, to moving into pre-sales, and now he works at a startup helping to build pre-sales teams. With all of this experience, you wouldn't have known that he has had his start working at Taco Bell. And today we talk about this journey and how you can be successful when considering a role in pre-sales, post-sales, and tech. So without further ado, if you need the details, fasten your safety belts and take a ride into pre-sales.
Hello, everybody. Today I have here a wonderful guest, and we know each other, man. We have met in person, so maybe a little bit different of a climate, but hey, Trevor, first off, I want to say thank you for coming on the show, for obviously being here to give, your light on things and being able to give, to inform the people who are going to be listening. So once again, first, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for having me on, man. And I hope I'm more than a guest. I feel like a bit of a friend, I would say. I think when you have drinks with somebody more than twice, then I would say you've gained friend status. So happy to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, man. Thank you so much, friend. And yeah, but for the people who are listening, though, how do you introduce yourself, whether it's on a podcast or it's on your, on your channels? Like, how can let people know like who you are and whatnot?
Yeah, how I introduce myself has changed a lot because I tend to shift roles quite a bit, actually. But my background, so everybody knows, I started in the military, got into like engineering, and then for the last about 5 years, I've really just been in the world of pre-sales from the perspective of like sales engineering or solutions architecture. And now I lead a solutions architecture org at a company called Common Room. So I'm about all things like customer facing, like consultative sales. Like that's what I love doing, and that's what I hope I get to do for the next decade or two. We'll see.
That's awesome. So I want to get this straight, because I've seen what Peter Cohen, great demo guy, he wrote that new book Discovery. He's doing this whole thing on he was once doing business development, worked with marketing, worked with sales. And you and I talked about this before. And I want to make sure that I'm saying this right, because I try to promote about the things that I enjoy too, just like you. Is this whole scheme of marketing, sales, pre-sales, post-sales, is that all considered go-to-market? Would that be like, say if you were to do that all wrapped in one place, what would that be considered?
Yeah, definitely. I think go to market is definitely the umbrella term that encompasses like market, anything from like the very top of your funnel, I guess, as we would use in industry terms, all the way to the point where a transaction takes place and the customer buys a product. But I would even say it is starting to extend further than when the sale is hit, because I would consider at least playing a small part in go to market. People like customer solutions managers, CSMs, TAMs, professional services, they are still a part of that go-to-market strategy, even if they're not like, in the executive rooms talking about like sales and marketing strategy.
Yeah. And you just said something there, and I want to talk about that because I want to say that's the theme, but this encompasses your background. This encompasses where you are today. You had a chance to like pretty much go from, you were once working in post sales, and a lot of the people that I've seen, in my experiences, have been in sales, before the sale has been made. But I feel post sales is another important place. And of course, I want to definitely talk about that. But the first question I always like to ask everyone who comes on the show, it's in regards to pre-sales and whatnot. But what was like the inspiration that made you say, heck, let's join pre-sales?
Yeah. So I had been in like engineering or consulting for like, I guess it would have been like 7 years or so at the time. And it was fun. It was something that I was good at. Like I was good at building solutions with customers, but I saw, at least at the time, what I would classify as like a cap, like a ceiling in that type of career, where like you can go so far professionally and financially, and then you have no choice really as an engineer but to move into management at some point once you kind of climb that technical ladder. Where and outside of the career progression stuff, there's also just like the personal learning. Like if you do engineering and hands-on technical work for a long time, you get better the more you do it. But I've always been really obsessed with trades or skills where there is a seemingly like limitless skill cap. I would say like musicians and public speakers and like artists fall into that category. And in my view, sales professionals also fall into that category. Sales is something that the difference between good and great can be massive, and you can always be honing that craft because it's always changing. So I knew that it was interesting to me. I wasn't sure if I would like it. But I thought it's worth a try. It'd be a new challenge, and just because of my kind of ambitious mentality, I like trying something new and shaking things up a little bit. And turned out to be, for me, the best career choice I've made. Like it took me from being in a career where I was like, maybe this is something I like doing, maybe I'll do something different in a few years, to where like, boom, now I'm right in a field where I love it and I don't want to do anything else.
That's cool. So yeah. A thought that came in before, though, because I wanted to ask that before I even asked the first question, but you were in post sales before.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And let people know. I want the sales people to know this. I want the people who I've worked in MLMs to know this. Tell people why is customer success? Why is post sales so important?
Oh, it's critical. I'll back up. Like how critical it is depends on what you sell, how it's consumed, how hard it is for a customer to like operationalize. We live in a world where there just are some tools where like they're so easy to use that you don't actually need professional services or a lot of customer success. However, in certain cycles, especially if you're selling like a complex engineering type of tool, you really do need like somebody to help get like, when you make the sale, like customers don't like automatically know how to adopt and integrate that into their environment, right? But as a sales professional, your job is not to deploy that for a customer. Your job is to close the deal, maintain the relationship, but also continue closing deals with other customers. So customer success, technical account managers, and professional services engineers and integrators play like a crucial role, because without them like being able to go actually deploy alongside the customer and educate the customer on how to operationalize what they bought after the fact, oftentimes, and I've seen this happen a lot, especially when I was in professional services, sometimes you can make a sale, but the product will sit unused. And while that can benefit a sales team initially, in the long term, it does not benefit a sales team or the company that they work for, because eventually in 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, the subscription or contract that the customer bought is going to run out, and that you're going to come back asking for a renewal or an expansion. And if they didn't deploy that tool and get value out of what you sold them, you've, in a sense, in my mind, you've betrayed the customer trust, because you told them that they were going to get some value in exchange for whatever they bought and they didn't. So customer success, professional services are just crucial to like making sure that customers actually get the value that they were promised by the pre-sales force or the sales force.
Yeah, I had a metaphor that came up real quick. I mean, I wish I could, I wish I could say it, but the whole idea, like, first off, I want to know that this pre-sales, sales, versus the post-sales side, they should not think of themselves as separate. This is all should all be working in in a synergistic way, right? Totally. They're all tied together. You know, if you mess up one thing, you know, it's all connected, right? And I guess maybe I'm thinking of maybe the body. I don't know, but you know, the question I think of times is, and they always talk about the handoff. You know, sales, handing off, pre-sales, handing off to post-sales, and knowing that, hey, you know, you've played a vital component to this, and you still continue to do so. And so, yeah, it's really good to hear that, because again, some people function on the idea that, oh, I sold it, now I can just move on to the next, you know, to the next prospective customer. But it's like, no, like you know, because they post-sales also, their complaint was always saying, oh, well, you know, the salesperson lied. They said that they were going to give this customer XYZ, and now here we are sitting here having to like put bandages or having to fix things that we, you know, never even, you know, thought we could do. And you know, it's really interesting.
Tony, this is a systemic problem, actually, right? And the reason that and what you described, by the way, is very common, happens all the time. It's getting better as the way that customers buy technology is changing, but like this is a symptom, not of like, in my mind, not of handoff. It's a symptom of like the job of sales, and specifically how sales teams are compensated. Sales managers, account managers, and even a lot of SEs, if you look at their comp plans, they are not incentivized to think long-term about their customer. They are incentivized to think quarter to quarter financially, right? And like, don't get me wrong, that's not how I operate. That's not how the best people that I work with operate. Most people that like most people have loyalty. Well, I want to do well personally, and I want my company to do well and my team to do well. So I do think long term in those cycles. But unfortunately, there's not been a good way to like compensate sales professionals to actually think more long term like that, because sales professionals change jobs every year, every two. They may not be around for the next renewal, so they may not care if it ever gets adopted, you know, which is a real shame. But I don't know how we tackle that problem other than, you know, what's already occurring, which are like certain trends in technology buying, where you don't like sign a 4-year fixed contract, but instead you have like a pay-as-you-go model where you start small and like grow over time. That is kind of one way that customers are able to avoid that pitfall of the sales rep promising the world and then forgetting about them the next week, you know, or next quarter.
Wow. Yeah. That you have me now keeping that as a referential question that I want to have perhaps in the future. But that's really interesting. That's the unfortunate dilemma that these sides have to face. You know, just like you said, like the tugging, a pressing matter of making sure what have they done this quarter, you know, that whole thing, the quote and whatnot. But yeah, so going back to you, man, like, okay, you know, you were in the Air Force, United States Air Force, and you were working in IT, right? What was, you know, how is that different, you know, working in IT in the Air Force than like a civilian IT organization?
Yeah, there were two big differences. One good and one bad. I'll start with the good one. The big reason it was different in especially so I was uniform. I wasn't a contractor. I was enlisted. So what occurs if you work in a technology field? So I was effectively a network engineer working for the Air Force. What happens is, you're a tech. That's a technical skill set where you're getting paid. Like people are getting paid not market rate. So what occurs is people do 4 years and then they get out and make 3 times as much money on the outside as an engineer. What this creates is an environment where all of the good engineers leave the military and all of the less talented engineers that can't get jobs on the outside or are too scared to make that step stay in. So what this means for like young people like myself, I was 19 years old and we had this massive complex base network that was being run by a bunch of inexperienced network engineers with 1 year of experience because none of our leaders knew anything about how the technology works. All the people that did left already. That may sound bad. It was actually incredible experience as a newcomer because you get to experiment and try and holy cow, that we break the base network. I probably brought the base network down hard at least 3 or 4 times while I was there. And like, that was just normal because we had a bunch of inexperienced 19 to 22-year-olds maintaining like $100 million plus critical infrastructures, right? So that was a good thing. You just in the role I was in, this isn't for everybody in the military, but I was very lucky to get very hands-on and very technical very fast. The kind of downside, however, to that type of a role compared to like the private sector, and by the way, just to contrast that with the private sector, like usually in the private sector, you would not get that much responsibility if you didn't have much experience, right? Like you would need to prove that you can be trusted. I couldn't, frankly, they shouldn't have trusted me with it. I broke the network a lot. That's not a good thing, but they had no other choice because that's just the way the system worked. The other aspect that I would focus on is just like the way that like employment and like processes work, right? You hear a lot about government and bureaucracy and like things moving a little bit more slowly. And so I would say like as a workforce, at least in the enlisted side, it's a little bit less like competitive than the private sector, right? In the private sector, it's a much more competitive work environment. Like your people are, jockeying for like the promotion or the job, and the military isn't the same. It's more like you will get promoted if you hit these certain criteria. And so I would just say it's more competitive, but also like you can move up a lot faster in the private sector, which is, I think, a benefit for an ambitious person. If you're enlisted in the military, you can do 20 years. And at the end of your 20-year term, you might break 6 figures, where in the private sector, you can get there in 2 years, 3 years if you're really hustling and you get the right opportunities.
Yeah. Here we are, both of you and I on this podcast. We're both, former military people.
Yeah.
You were on the Air Force side. I was on the Army side. I got a little taste of the Air Force when I was overseas in the desert, working with some of the Air Force people because, part of my job was hauling fuel for those C5 aircrafts. And it's funny that you say, if contrary to many people's belief, we would have thought, you uncovered this, that although you were in the Air Force, you never stepped once into a plane or never worked with planes or anything like that.
Yeah, that's right. The base I was on didn't even have an active flight line. So like you could not fly into the base. In fact, we used the flight line to do physical training. So we would just use it to run and do push-ups and setups and stuff. There was never a plane touchdown on that base. They would fly into the municipal airport down the road and then drive into the base, which is kind of funny. Yeah, kind of funny. People always ask like, what type of plane did you fly? Whenever I tell them I was in the Air Force, and I usually will say something like a Cisco 6000 Catalyst switch. That's what I was flying those days.
Wow. So I'm thinking of I had something that I wanted to say just before, but the pain points, right? I'm thinking of when you were talking about what was going on in the Air Force. I just know how it was in the overall military. Even when I go to the VA hospital,
yeah.
And I'm thinking of software. Whether I was in or now going as a patient to the hospital, I was in Presales Collective's Academy, and we talked about those pains where like they played as a pseudo customer, and the idea was like, oh, we got very manual software. Actually, a lot of our stuff are on spreadsheets and everything like that. And I just remember in the Army, it was the same idea. Everything was still through paperwork. Everything was still slow. And of course, man, it's unfortunate because that's such a they're working with monolithic systems for many reasons, maybe for security reasons, concerns and all that. But for us, maybe the end user or whatever, it's just like, oh, come on, man, everything's super slow. And I don't know, you just reminded me of like that situation of you being in the Air Force, and the pros was, hey, you were able to make so many mistakes, and it was totally fine. But then like, in terms of like another standpoint, I'm looking at how slow and fragmented and manualized the processes perhaps.
Oh yeah,
were.
It was a terrible customer experience. It's not very good for the consumers of like the network services that I provide. That's how it operated. Yeah. And definitely like the military just in the DoD especially just tends to move slower. Like I would say like you can just about bet on them being like 5, sometimes 10 years behind the latest technology trends, at least when you're talking like branch wide, like Army wide or Air Force wide. There are little pockets of innovation that occur in defense, like at the Pentagon and DARPA and things like that. But takes time. Those gears move very, very slowly to trickle that down to the wider military tech experience for sure.
And so if we're looking back in the Air Force, just so I know, like if in whatever you can disclose, what were you doing in IT? I mean, you could even be high level. Like what were the things you were doing? Like you were a network engineer, right? You were working with layer 3. So like, I can let people know exactly what that is too. Like, what is the network? I know a little bit about it, but like, what about the people who are just trying to get familiarized? Like, what's that area, and what were you doing in the Air Force?
Yeah, so specifically, like I worked in communications, which means different than communications in the corporate world. We were focusing on like technology communications, network systems, telephone systems. So specifically, you could think of me like a Cisco network engineer. I was logging into routers, switches, a lot, and because it's the military and encryption was very important. I was also I specialized in like encryption and VPN technologies because I'll use a couple words here that people that were in the military may have heard before. Like I would work on like NIPR, SIPR, and like different types of like levels of classifications of networks. And so oftentimes you would need to like build VPN tunnels to like get traffic to different parts of the world or the country safely. And so that was something I would coordinate as well. There was a lot of like late nights where like I'm on one end of a VPN tunnel and then like I'm calling some other young 18-year-old kid that has no idea what he's doing on the other side of a VPN tunnel and be like, hey, I'm gonna upgrade the encryption key. Are you ready? And like, yeah, let's do it. And we upgrade the keys and it doesn't work and we roll it back and we do it again until finally we figure it out. But yeah, just a lot of like IP and encryption type of technologies.
That so you made me think, because I know my boy Ramsey Marjabov, we the sales engineers, he's in telecom. Is there parallels between what he does civilian versus what you did in the Air Force?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know exactly what, like I know he works for like Alcatel-Lucent and stuff, but like I worked on like Nortel Alcatel-Lucent switches. Like the I know the companies that he's worked for sell like enterprise networking gear and equipment. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap I think in both of our skill sets for sure. And that was one of the great things about like there are some technology fields in the military that map perfectly into a civilian career and some don't. Like that was one, like networking or like server administration, it maps exactly into a specific civilian career. Software engineering, same thing. But then there are others that don't map as well. Like for example, like being an intelligence analyst. Like it's a little technical, but it doesn't actually map to a civilian career quite as directly as like something that's working on, because the military uses the exact same equipment that private sector uses. They buy the same servers from Dell and IBM, and they buy the same switches from Cisco and Juniper and Alcatel-Lucent and all these big firms. So very transferable skills if you find yourself in the right career.
Oh, that's good to know. Because, again, the point of the show is obviously to attract people who perhaps were just like me. They got out of the military and they're trying to figure out what's going on in the civilian area, or, they're working in a non-technical area. Maybe they worked healthcare. Maybe they worked as therapists, whatever. It could be anything. But I want them to understand, like, the potential of them if they're considering tech, and for someone who's just jumping out of maybe active duty, military, to see if there's a promising future for them in tech. And this is good to hear.
Yeah, there is. My number one piece of advice is if you are fortunate enough to be in right now, and you know that you are working on technology that is being used in the private sector, learn it. Right? If you touch a server or an operating system or some type of technology in your military career, get certified in that. Like that's what I got a bunch of Cisco certs while I was in. That was incredibly valuable in making that transition. And nobody makes you do it in the military. Like you have to, no, your boss isn't going to say, go get certified, go dig into this technology. They care more about you passing your PT test and wearing the uniform correctly. Right? It's up to you as an individual to focus on the skills that are transferable while you are in. And so that would be my top piece of advice. And then if you're closer to the end of your term, start talking to folks like me, like Tony, people that have been there and made that transition, because there's a really supportive community of veterans out there that want nothing more than to, we don't always have a job that we can put right in front of you, but we are more than happy to be a shoulder to lean on and help share experiences that'll make it easier for you to make that transition.
Yeah. Just got 10. It just popped up as
I see that. Yeah.
But okay. So little understanding and disclaimer for those who are listening. Trevor used to work at Taco Bell. It's super cool. The fact that you put that on your LinkedIn too. That's first off, what why do you leave it up there? Just curious, why? I mean, again, Taco Bell, that was a while ago, because you've now been in IT and in pre-sales for some time, but why do you leave it up?
I leave it up because I'm proud of it. I actually, that was my first job. That was me 16 years old, thinking that like trying to buy my first car, or I thought at the time that I would be able to save money making $6 an hour enough to pay for college. I was wrong, and that's why I ended up joining the military. Can't really pay for college on minimum wage, but anyway, yeah. I mean, to me, it was I'm proud that that's how I started my work career. I think that I learned a lot of really valuable life lessons as a young person in high school, working with adults that were working kind of entry level minimum wage jobs. And plus it's fun. Taco Bell makes great food, let's be honest. And it creates a fun way to, I'm a big believer, whether it's LinkedIn or even here, in my background, you see I have my bass and musical instruments, and same on LinkedIn. I believe when people say show yourself or be authentic, I think the way I interpret that a lot of times is give other people excuses to connect with you. Right. But because that's on my LinkedIn, I've had so many people be like, oh man, my first job was at McDonald's, or oh, I worked at Pizza Hut, or, oh, that's crazy, I worked at Taco Bell too. I met a person like that a couple weeks ago. So I think it's just it's fun to give people more context about who you are, and it can become a way to create a personal connection with people when you have something in common. And nobody will know that you have something in common unless you show yourself to them. And that's a way to do that,
True. So, before you got into the professional space, before the military, before corporate and startups, and I just want to say, look, in the little world of military, your, E1 to E3 or E4 times were humble beginnings, where oh, look, he came from he had no clue about what he was doing in IT, and now look where he is now. But the true humble beginnings for everyone else is you working at Taco Bell. That's super humble beginnings right there. And that's, I don't know, there's obviously no nobility in that, to be man, this guy went from that, and he's proud of it. And that's great. You're right. It provides context to people. But before you got into this professional space, to inspire someone who believes their background could not be the puzzle piece to ultimately be in pre or post sales, what would you say working at Taco Bell, has done for you today?
I mean, I would say the biggest thing is it taught me how to navigate complex power dynamics, like even though it's like that small world of like a Taco Bell, like there are power dynamics of like a manager and an assistant manager and shift leaders. And like as a individual contributor, just like a regular team member, like knowing how to navigate that. And like, for example, I was promoted to like a team trainer, which, meant that you get like 25 cents an hour more or something, but you train other employees. And like that was through me appealing to the people who make that decision, the managers, like showing them that I'm worthy of that responsibility and that I'm reliable. And so I think that was a lesson that like I was lucky to learn that lesson of like, if you just show up on time and care about what you do and take pride in what you do, you are going to stand above the rest. And I was very lucky to learn that before I got into the military. And then the other thing is, I think in general, like whether it's Taco Bell or a call center or like McDonald's or working at a grocery store, like really understanding like the fundamentals of customer service and how to create an experience for somebody is very, very valuable. And that's a skill set that can take you into many careers. Like that's a foundation that if you really build and you know how to make people feel like listened to, heard, and special, that will benefit you your entire life, whether you're working in food services or technology or wherever you go.
That's awesome. See, like there's always a parallel though. There is always a connection to that. And so, some people will like, well, I worked here. Like, how's that really going to transfer over? But it does, again, I say it's a puzzle piece, or it could even be a direct thing. Thinking about customer success, I have a friend, and actually some of my customer success friends ask these questions. They'll come to me on LinkedIn and be like, look, I see you're in pre-sales and I'm really curious, or I'm really interested in jumping in. I know this one lady that wants to jump in from customer success to pre-sales. I want to give some information to these people who are already, who are in this role, like, people who are already in customer success, but want to make a jump into pre-sales. Like, how would their current time in customer success be an advantage into into getting into pre-sales or being a pre-sales professional?
Yeah, I think that anybody that is in a sort of customer facing role has an unfair advantage if they're looking to get into sales or consulting or anything that's very customer relationship driven. So, if you're a customer solutions manager, CSM, even post sales or like technical account management or something like that, I would say like focus on the skills that you can develop in your current role that will set you up for success in a sales role. So like, for example, you may have opportunities to present to customers. Maybe as a CSM, it's possible nobody will ask you to present to a customer, but like you get to be creative and you can put together a presentation and present that to customers when you think it makes sense. And so I would focus on like those communication and presentation skills, and like CSMs can sell. Like oftentimes it's their charter to like upsell customers or like ensure that there's customer retention and renewals. So like focus on that part of the sales cycle that you're in today. And now, like, there is a question if you're a CSM. I actually think that CSMs, by and large, have like the customer facing skills that they would need to transition to sales if they've been doing it for very long. I would say like the bigger question is like the thing that you would want to focus on more, especially when it be an SE, is to focus on your technical skill set, because that's not something you're just going to get as a CSM in a lot of cases. And so if you want to be an SE, like that's going to be very important to you getting that job. If you want to just be a regular sales rep, then you don't need to focus on that. You can just focus on like the selling aspect of it. And what better way to get into a sales role than to like close help play a critical part in like an upsell or a strategic renewal while you're a CSM. I think that would be a good goal to set for yourself to develop those skills.
How does one know if they're a fit given a specific area, right? So maybe they don't want to be in startups. Maybe they don't want to be in a Fortune 100, 500 company. Maybe they want to be in military, or maybe they don't want to be in military. They want to be in a startup, or they want to be in corporate. Like how does one know if they're a fit for pre or post sales? Like what's the mindset of these? What's the way of life for each of these types, these areas?
Well, let me start with like the three different types of companies, and then I can maybe speak a little bit more to like pre or post sales, because I feel like those are kind of separate. So when it comes to like, if you're actually at a cross point in your life of like, you're thinking like, should I go work at a big like tech company? Should I go work at a startup, or should I join the military? Like that decision is going to be driven a lot by like your age and where you're at in your life, right? It's because like a big thing to consider is like, this was a huge benefit for me and why I joined the military. Anybody can join the military. Like pretty much all you need is to like not have like medical issues, and you can get an entry level job and get experience and get a free education. All right. So like you asked, like you talked about me working at Taco Bell and stuff. Like I didn't join the military because I wanted to join the military. I joined the military because that was the option that I had to start a life for myself. Okay. Not everybody's in that position. Like, for example, if you have a college education and a degree, you might be able to skip that step and you might be able to go right into working for a corporation or a startup. So like, I think that what informs that decision is, in my mind, a little bit less about like what your personality is and more about the circumstances that life has dealt you, which is totally out of your control. Startup versus big corporation, a lot of that comes down to like, personality types. Like some people like the stability of a big corporation. Some people like the dynamic nature of a startup. It's so hard. Like I'm a big believer that like your happiness and like what you like in your work should not be dictated so much by the company that you work for, but more like the actual day-to-day job that you're executing on. And so I would encourage people to think much less about people. I think people think too much about the brands and the companies that they're going to work for. And they don't think enough about like, what is something that I would enjoy doing for 8 hours a day? That is the question. Not, do I want to work at Amazon or Google or a cool startup? The question is, what do I want to be doing for 8 hours a day? And then you need to plan your life around your career around the answer to that question, which is, by the way, a hard question to answer. But that is the root of like how you make, in my mind, like a successful career for yourself, is finding yourselves in jobs that you enjoy. Now, I can luckily get a little bit more specific on this when it comes to like pre-sales versus post-sales, because I think there are like some different personality types, right? I think that if you geek out on the technology, like if you just love the engineering side of things and really digging deep into how things work in actual production customer environments, post-sales is the way to go. Because some pre-sales engineers have that knowledge, but by and large, like post-sales are focused on like actually making it work in real life, where pre-sales, the skill is not that actually. The skill set is like influencing and helping customers understand the value of something, so that way they can then go deploy it in production. And so I think like it's a lot of like, what type of people do you like to work with? If you really just want to work with engineers, you might be better in post-sales. If you really don't love presenting and you don't have like I don't think you need to be an extrovert to be an SE, but I think if you don't like the idea of doing a presentation or a talk or a podcast, probably post-sales is a good place to be. But if you like the idea of like a more performative style of work, maybe if you're a musician or you did drama or like stand-up comedy and you like that kind of like being in front of a crowd and like figuring out how to connect with an audience, SE is going to be way more interesting to you than post-sales, and pre-sales will be more interesting than post-sales, I guess I should say.
So going to certifications, you're known. I mean, maybe you're just known in my world, but the world that I see, of course, on LinkedIn, where you have a pretty nice following there. You're building a following on YouTube too. Like, you breached the 1,000 mark on YouTube. That's a big thing.
I did. I just breached 6,000 a couple of days ago.
You did.
Which for me feels big. Yeah.
This is amazing. I mean, that's awesome. So you're building a following. First off, what would you say your brand on YouTube is? Like, what are you trying to showcase? What's the audience? What would you say?
It's funny because you tagged me in something on Twitter about branding the other day, and like I responded, I need to work on that. I really need, like, I don't know the answer to that question, Tony. Like what I view this as is like YouTube, LinkedIn, it's all an experiment. It is only fun to me. Like, I think that every once in a while I have a thought or an idea and I think, I bet delivering that idea to the world might help a couple people. And then I do it. And I have no rules about what that is. For when I worked at AWS, I did a lot of AWS content. I'll do a little bit of that every now and then if I think of something and I see that's not being captured in like the YouTube sphere. Same with like LinkedIn. Like it's all just like thoughts that I have. I would say like if I had to summarize it, like I focus on like technology career like advice, guidance, and mentorship. Kind of like resource guides for certifications and like common questions that somebody's new may ask, and sales and marketing tips and tricks and guidance. And that's an area that I'm starting to do more of now, actually. And I hope to focus more on like the sales engineering space in this new role that I'm in, just because it is less cloud and AWS focused, which I think is what I've been doing for like the last year. There are challenges with that, by the way, because one great thing about making AWS content is that there's a massive audience for AWS content. And I'm acknowledging that as a creator, I am now going after a smaller, more niche audience. Fortunately for me, like, I'm not trying to make money in this. I actually do just think it's fun and want to help people. And so that doesn't really matter as much to me as like doing what I think is fun and interesting. Because gosh, creating is not easy. Like, it takes a lot of mental energy, a lot of time. And so if you're not making stuff that you actually think is fun and helpful, then it's going to get, for me, I couldn't do it. It would be a chore. And the second it becomes like, it feels like a job and not something fun is whenever I would, not be interested in doing it anymore, most likely.
Yeah, I totally understand. To me, you're known as a consumer of your content. You're known as not only the pre-sales, sales engineer kind of guy, but you from what I've grabbed is you're the certifications guy as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of AWS and I'm, studying for the cloud practitioner and all that stuff. But how about this? Like, first off, just list off the certifications that you have, like overall, like what's the name of the certifications you have so at this point?
Yeah, no, the reason I noticed that is because like when I mentioned, like whenever I think there's something that can help people, I just make a video about it. And so like I got a lot of certifications in the last few years. And so then I just happened to be making videos about that. So I've got a bunch of AWS certs. I think I got 5 or 6 last year. I got the Solution Architect Associate, SysOps Associate, Developer Associate, Cloud Practitioner. I got the Networking Specialty Cert, and then I got the Solutions Architect Professional certification. So I got those all last year, but I was working at AWS. I was definitely like cheating. You know what I mean? Like, I had an unfair advantage because I was doing this in my day job. It's not like I was just studying the certs. But then before that, like, I'd gotten some project management certs, a lot of VMware certifications because I worked at VMware for 5 years. But I got my start in certifications with my very first cert was CompTIA Security Plus because the military made me get that. And then I went on a tear of like Cisco. So it's like if my career has like 3 phases, it would be like Cisco networking, and then like server administration with VMware, and then cloud computing was like the third kind of technical phase in my career. Certs are great, by the way. Like, certs get a lot of weird flack. Like, there's a bunch of like grumpy old engineers that like love to talk smack about certs. Like those people are, I will say, I'll put a stake in the ground and say, everybody who says anything bad about getting certifications is dead wrong. They do not have your best interest in mind whatsoever. They have some weird ego thing that they're trying to figure out. Certifications are good for you. They're good for your career. They are not a magic bullet. They are not a golden ticket. But if you were a hiring manager, would you want to hire somebody who is certified or who is not certified? What do you think? Like, use just logical thinking. If you've heard somebody, like, it actually frustrates me a lot, because there is just this weird like sentiment on like Reddit and like and other online sites of like, you shouldn't get too many certifications. It's like you shouldn't learn too much too quick. No, like, wrong, just wrong. It's not even like based in any like helpful. It's not like they're saying, instead of doing this, do something else useful. They're just saying, oh, you shouldn't get certifications. It's going to turn recruiters and hiring managers off. If I'm a hiring manager, it raises my eyebrow. Like, oh, this person put in some time to like be structured and learn something. And show me a hiring manager that doesn't like certified people, and I'll show you somebody you absolutely do not want to ever consider working for, because that person is completely backwards in my mind. Sorry, I got fired up on that one, Tony. I don't even know how I got there.
great gems. No, great gems, because that's the dilemma. People are wondering, like, oh, should I get a certification? Should I not? I've heard some people in certain pockets, oh, don't do that. You shouldn't get certifications. I mean, there's so much things that I'm hearing about it, but I believe it. I do believe, like, someone off the street who has no background in anything, they should get, they should learn, and they're a better candidate in the eyes of a hiring manager or a recruiter who has some knowledge versus someone who does not.
Right.
So I agree with that. So what about someone who's straight off the street? I like to say that word, like meaning they have no experience. Like they're like, I'm a healthcare person, but I'm leaving and I want to get into tech and I want to learn, but I have no experience. I have no clue what any of this technical stuff is. Like they're super new into tech. Like what certifications would you recommend that they should try to get started on?
Yeah. So love the question. And like the answer depends on the moment in time when somebody's listening to this. Okay. Because as somebody with no experience, if your goal is, if you don't have any like specific, like I want to do networking, I want to do, if you don't have a thing that you already know you want to do, what the first step that you need to take is like, do a competitive analysis, like do a job market analysis, right? Go online and find out where there are the most jobs for people that don't have a lot of experience. Okay. That changes year to year. That changes I would say every 5 years it changes. When I started, it was networking and Cisco technologies were how you can get your foot in the door, because network engineering was like in a boom whenever I started back in like 2010 timeframe. There were data centers being built everywhere. They needed a lot of data center network engineers at that moment. Now in 2023 and for the last few years, it's been trending towards like cloud computing certifications have been a really good way to get your foot in the door with no previous experience. But so I would say like do your research and like find out where like there are the most jobs and focus on getting certified in that. But in parallel to getting certified, like what you do, if you don't have any experience, you can't just get certified. You really do need to, through that process, take very seriously getting hands-on with the technology, because while it would be great if we lived in a world where like you could just understand theory and then get like an entry-level sales job easily, that is not the world that we live in. The lowest friction tech job that you're going to get is one that requires hard skills that you have. And so you need to develop those hard skills. There are just more engineering jobs than there are sales jobs, period. That's just how it is. And so if your goal is to get your foot in the door, you need to focus on the area where there are the most jobs, and that is jobs where there are hard engineering skills required. And that's where you need to get certified and get hands-on with whatever engineering technology is hot right now, or that you think will be hot. By the way, I would say when I say is hot, I just want to caveat this. That does not mean that Twitter is talking about it. Kubernetes is not something that an entry-level person needs to learn. It may be hot on Twitter. That is not what I mean. When I say hot, I mean deployed in production, needing human beings to love, care, and maintain for it. That's what I mean when I say hot. And that can be like cloud systems. That can be data center infrastructure systems right now. Some software. So there's a lot of systems that are widely deployed by companies that are a pretty safe bet to learn from a skill set perspective.
That's awesome. I had a question I wanted to ask before that. Oh, but here's what I want to say. So through my time working in pre-sales, there's some applications that I enjoy using, right? Like I learned Salesforce because that's just a repo that everybody uses, which is just, there's nothing you can say right now. Salesforce is like one of the CRMs that we just, business development, sales, pre-sales, we got to use it to put stuff in there, so I enjoy that. I also liked Gondola, formerly known as Demo Flow, which allowed me to really seamlessly go through a demo and just make me look really just made me look like a superstar. They're like, man, your transitions were clean. I like that, What would you say are some pre-sales applications or just applications that you use at work, like that you enjoy? Like they're, which ones are like favorites of yours and why?
It's an interesting question. So there's a few that come to mind. Like my answer is not going to be like a CRM or anything like that. I think the number one tool in my kit, I believe that at least I have the most fun using, I think is cool, is actually like not so much an application as much as it is like a setup, like what you're seeing right now, me on camera with the microphone and the lights and stuff. Like, I think that is actually one of the most important tools that I use in my work, because my job is to connect with people, communicate with people, and help them understand something that they didn't understand before we met on the call. And so I believe that, like, when I think about tools of the trade that help me the most, I think that this silly microphone and camera and the communication skills I bring to the table are the things I obsess over them with. Those are the things that move the needle, not the tooling in my mind. That said, I work at a company called Common Room. I use that a lot right now to prospect in my accounts and to try to like research customers or just like be more like understanding of customers and respond to questions that they have and just try to take a customer centric approach where I can add value sooner. Like anything that helps me add value to a customer sooner in the sales cycle and before a competitor does, I'm a big fan of. So like social listening platforms like Common Room are a great way to do that. And I'm also using, so I like the other two things I say, cloud providers, awesome, because you can build really fast demos in a cloud provider that were like impossible to build in your home lab 5 years ago at the same speed. So I use public cloud providers like AWS, GCP a lot to build demos. And lately I'm making a lot of content. And when I'm making content, I'm having a chat GPT window open a lot. I would say of all the productivity tools I use, chat GPT is probably the number one. Because like just having it open, like I'll have random thoughts and ideas. Like here's an example. I was building a demo for marketing people the other day, and I've never been a marketing person. I kind of know what marketing people care about, but I just asked ChatGPT, like, hey, what are like the top 5 KPIs that marketing people care about, right? That's a really good data point if you're trying to build a compelling story and demos for those people. And yeah, I could have like read 10 blogs about it, but I find it easier to just ask ChatGPT. It gives me a pretty decent answer most of the time to questions like that.
Awesome. So I also want to shout out Drift. Drift was a nice application to allow two things, to automate that workflow, or at least to automate, how customers would come in on a website, ask a question, and then it would be down to the team to triage that and say, all right, who would be in charge of this? I mean, could we just have the chat bots answer it? If it's something a little more pressing, then maybe we would jump on it. But also they had this cool thing too, where you could, record a quick video of yourself and be like, hey, how you doing? I'm Tony, I'm Trevor. And, it just personalizes your experience with that prospective customer. So I got to shout out Drift on that one.
Yeah. I'm using a similar one called Loom for the same thing right now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great one for those little short personalized demo videos to send somebody. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah. So you took a 6-month break after VMware, to go hiking in the Appalachian Mountains, right? What did you learn from that experience? I mean, there's times, there's a lot of mass layoffs going on. There's, people having to take hiatus for any kind of reasons, whether it's family or any other kind of things. What did you learn from just that experience? First off, just hiking through those mountains for 6 months.
Like it's funny because like I believe that one of the best things you can do for your career is to just like work on yourself. Like if you have your own mental health and like your own happiness and like you really know yourself. And you strive to just be a good person in your personal life, that will bleed over to your success in your career, especially in sales, where like your job is to like kind of make people trust you and like you and follow you places. So anyway, like I took that because I was actually not sure if I wanted to stay in technology. Like I wanted a break from technology to see if it was actually a career that I wanted to do. What I learned was that actually like technology is a great career for me. Like while I was out there, I just kind of realized like, well, most people, you got to do something, most, like, I don't come from wealth. Like I got to have a job. I got to do something to take care of my life, my family. And it was just like it was like a nice sanity check to be like, no, this is probably the best thing for me to be doing, to be working in technology right now. Otherwise, like, I think I just learned a lot about people that come from different walks of life. Like when you hike on that particular trail, the Appalachian Trail, school teachers, military folks, like, kind of like hippies from like weird little towns throughout the country, college students, older people that are retired, like so many different types of people are out there taking a break and like enjoying themselves on a hiking trip like that. And so you just learn a lot about different people and really learn about the dynamics of like how people connect with each other in a vulnerable place. If I could boil it down to one lesson, what I found is like, it's kind of hard to connect with customers sometimes on Zoom, right? Or like even like going out to a bar or a restaurant, like it's kind of hard to like just connect with a total stranger. Like there's these walls that people put up, but in the context of like two people that are on this epic journey hiking through the mountains that have stumbled into each other, say, like serendipitously in the middle of the woods one day. Like you can become best friends in 5 minutes. You just have this connection through the shared experience and this vulnerability and this kind of extreme decision that you've made together to say, we're going to put life on hold and go on this, adventure. So I was a student of that the whole time. And it was just really amazing to me. Like what it gave me is hope for how people can, and I think maybe are meant to connect with each other. Like if we look to like, how humanity started, like I bet that the way people connected back like before like modern society and technology was much more similar to like that fast connection that I had with people in the middle of the woods on the Appalachian Trail than it is today, where we have these kind of walls up between ourselves and people, whether it's at work or out at a bar or a restaurant or a concert or whatever it is that you're doing in your kind of modern life.
That's awesome. And just for people to know, I mean, there's different fashions, and obviously I try to be mindful of it. I mean, I've dealt with it as well, like having to take a hiatus or having to take a break. But whether it's a break for a week, whether it's a break for a month, or even a break in your case for 6 months, and like, how is taking these type of breaks beneficial for someone who's trying to get back into the job market?
I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I don't know that I could say it's like necessarily like beneficial to take a 6 month like break. I think that you just got to kind of work with the cards that life hands you sometimes. And I think like if you're like, if you find yourself, like I know a lot of people are, like laid off or like trying to get into a new job right now. I think if you find yourself in that position, like it is a good time to think about like, what can I do to work on myself, whether that's a certification or a college class or, something like I did was like a relatively inexpensive, like kind of fun thing that like gave me a sense of purpose whenever like I know that, psychologically in the event of somebody being like laid off and looking for a job, that can be something that people are lacking. And so I think if you have like thoughts like that, like giving yourself permission to just do it and like not overthinking the downsides, but I don't know that I could say, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what you think. To me, it was beneficial on a personal level, which I think contributes to like my professional life, but it's hard for me to say like the benefit of like taking a hiatus so much, just because that was the only time I've really ever done it,
Well, I mean, I could say this. I worked in psychology for some time. I've learned, whether it's the books or even personal anecdote, that taking breaks of some sort, whether it's a day break, a week break, a month break, maybe in several months break, is definitely beneficial to the brain. There's this whole idea of like the Pomodoro technique, where you're studying or you're reading, you're doing work, and then you give yourself 5-minute break by simply walking away from that area of which you associate work to. Whether that's going for a walk, grabbing a coffee, using the, grabbing something to eat, using the going for a bio break. It cleanses that palate so that now your brain associates, a little bit more ease with work. You don't come back stressed. And there's, this whole idea of like CAT scans, brain scans, of the brain. When it's under stress, it doesn't function optimally, it's more constrained and, it's restricted. And so you want to return back to that work, that thing that your brain associates as work, with more ease and like positivity. So I really do believe breaks of some sort, by literally like moving away from it, maybe taking walks or even sometimes vacations, literally vacations are beneficial so that when you come back working with more productivity.
I love that. And I think that's so true. And it made me think of something like when you ask like, of like the benefit of taking like the break that I took, it made me think of, like sometimes taking that can or whether it's a break that you choose to take or that kind of somebody else chose for you, like it can be really nice to go through experiences where you're not working for a while to just remind yourself that like you can like find happiness and meaning and fulfillment in life like outside of your career. Like I have now a kind of refreshed sense of like my identity is not fully tied to the work that I do. And I think that that's actually quite healthy for somebody like me anyway, to know that like in the event I were to like lose my job, I could, or something were to occur that was outside of my control, that I could find some peace, because I've done it before. and I think going there it can give you that maybe confidence. At least I think it probably has for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I also believe too. Like, we could look at work like, oh, this is what happens, when you take a break from your job. But another thing is too, like, there's something that goes on a little bit more internal, maybe a silver lining, something we could say mentally, spiritually, whatever. But you start to discover things. You start to discover more things when you take those breaks, like about yourself that you didn't know before, because you're so narrow into thinking about just the work that you forget about yourself, which is ultimately at the end of the day, that's the most important, is you. Certifications, you're the certification guy. What have been, I'm thinking of education, like what have been your top books, blogs, or people you follow that has allowed you to level up?
Yeah, like it's funny, I knew you were going to ask this question, so I pulled up my my Audible on my phone so I could just look through all the books that I've read in the last couple of years. I find, and this is just for me personally, like I like a healthy mix of like kind of like neo philosophy, business, and sales. And then also I really love biographies about people that I think I could learn something from. So I think I learned a lot, like in the biography space. I learned a lot from reading like the Steve Jobs bio. I read a memoir by Phil Knight, who founded Nike. I also, fun fact, Ben Franklin is like my 8th great uncle, and I read his biography as well. And just like being able to immerse yourself in the mind of what a innovative thinker, like how they view the world, and how that's different. It is different than how most people view the world. To me, has been very, very helpful. And I think it's given me like some confidence in like knowing that like, even if I have a thought or opinion that maybe counter to like the norm, that I should still pursue that, because usually it's wrong, but maybe there's something there still that I've seen that somebody else hasn't seen. Outside of that, like, I don't know, I would actually say like I could recommend a bunch of sales books or like stuff like that. I think the most helpful book that I've read is actually when I was 18, a friend gave me a book called The Miracle of Mindfulness, and it's literally just a book about like kind of basic meditation techniques. And I think that has been something that's helped me professionally throughout my whole life, because the work is stressful. Life is stressful, and like learning how to manage that early in my life, I think has probably paid more dividends than any book can read. But in general, like I encourage people to just like consume a lot of books, because like what you'll find is, for me, I never read a book and I'm like, wow, that whole book was awesome, I'm going to take all of that book with me. What it turns into is like you'll read 10 different insights in a book, and like one of those insights was there right when you needed it, and you're going to take that with you. And now like that's a part of you and what you're doing. But like you can't just like memorize a whole book and then action, like put all that into action. Like you kind of have to continually revisit stuff like this, and you're going to slowly kind of pick that up along the way. And a lot of it's like timing and like what you were receptive to when you heard it, So yeah, I think always be consuming stuff that helps you like understand the world better, or like that you just find interesting and fun.
Yeah, you and I were talking about meditation, and of course, I wholeheartedly, I'm a proponent. I'm a big person on meditation. That's another way of obviously getting away from work, and really just it really cleanses that palate, allows you to just return back to whatever it is with more joy and happiness. And Vipassana meditation was the thing that I recommended. And I definitely would love anyone to try to check it out, because it's free, but all it's asking for you is 10 days of your time. So if anyone ever wants to consider it a life-changing experience, Vipassana meditation is one of those. You get a place to stay. They give you food included. It's just that it's 10 days of devoting to, meditating in a hall and really getting more in tune with yourself.
Yeah, that's on my to-do list as soon as I can. I just started this new job, so I got to wait until I can justify 10 days off, but I'll get around to that one. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So lastly, if pre-sales or post-sales, actually both of them, just a little insight maybe into Trevor, or maybe if this is just an analogy, but if pre-sales and post-sales were a beverage or food, what would it be?
To me, pre-sales is like whoever's listening to this, it's whatever your favorite food is. Pre-sales is like ice cream or like a juicy steak or like a beautiful like 5-star meal at your favorite restaurant. That's what pre-sales is to me. And then post-sales is like broccoli, it's like steamed broccoli without any salt, just like regular, like you need to eat it. It is for your own good, but you don't love to eat it. That's just me. Some people would say it's the opposite, and that's great too.
Wow. So what standpoint are we looking at this at? Like the broccoli, the person who has to eat the broccoli is the customer, or is that more of like the customer success manager themselves?
I'm thinking of it through like a go-to-market phase of like, frankly, like salespeople, like the job is like fun, competitive, highly rewarding, where like post-sales it's just not a rewarding job. Like there's no president's club for post-sales. Post-sales people don't get huge commission checks whenever they accomplish some feat of strength. It's just a different skill and it's rewarded differently. And so that's why I think if I look at it through the lens of like a business person, like thinking of like a go-to-market strategy, I think of post-sales as like, and it's not broccoli because it's bad. It's broccoli because it's important. You need to eat your broccoli, you need your greens, but it's not like super sexy, and it's not how your company is going to like grow in the long term. How your company is going to grow in the long term is like eating that ice cream of like sales and marketing and product development at the end of the day.
There you go. Well, Trevor, thank you again for coming on the show, and really thank you for giving us, especially the listeners, your time and experience and knowledge of the area. Once again, just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Tony. It was a pleasure.